visit. I studied there, under scholars who'd make most folks' heads spin, and I earned every degree I've got. Not a one came with my morning coffee. The room shifted. A few senators stifled smiles. Others nodded slowly. And even some of Warren's allies seemed to shrink in their seats. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, then continued. If you're done trying to win debates with cheap shots, maybe we can get back to the real work here, making sure every child in America gets a fair shot at a good education. The air in the chamber changed instantly. It wasn't just a response. It was a masterclass in dignity. A moment where Kennedy didn't just defend himself, but redirected the entire conversation to what mattered most. His words were sharp, but not vicious, pointed, but not petty. He didn't need to raise his voice or sling insults to make his point. This clarity and conviction did all the heavy lifting. The power of the moment lay in its restraint. Where Warren had gone for a personal jab, Kennedy answered with facts, poise, and a subtle wit that hit harder than any shout could. Some senators tried to hide their reactions, their faces betraying a mix of surprise and respect. Others, even those who usually sided with Warren, avoided eye contact, as if realizing she'd miscalculated her target. But Kennedy wasn't finished. He looked around the room, his gaze steady, and added a final thought that drove the point home. Smart doesn't always sound fancy, ma'am. Where you're from or how you talk doesn't measure your worth. Intelligence is earned, not performed, and character is shown, not staged. Boom! The words landed like a gavel, firm and final. The chamber was silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of quiet, not the stunned hush of Warren's attack, but the reverent pause that follows something profound. In less than a minute, Kennedy had turned a personal slight into a universal statement, not just defending his own honor but speaking for every person who's ever been underestimated because of their accent, their background, or their style. He didn't just clap back. He redefined the conversation, shifting the focus from himself to the broader issue of education and the values that matter. The room felt it. The senators felt it. Even the staffers, usually immune to the drama of Senate hearings, seemed to sit up straighter. This wasn't about one man's ego. It was about leadership, about taking a cheap shot and turning it into a moment of truth. Kennedy's response wasn't just a defense of his credentials, it was a stand for everyone who's ever been judged unfairly, a reminder that real intelligence shines through action, not appearances. As he leaned back in his chair, the faintest hint of a smile on his face, the chamber seemed to exhale collectively, processing what they'd just witnessed. Some senators scribbled notes. Others whispered to their neighbors. But all of them knew they'd seen something extraordinary. This was John Kennedy at his finest. A man who could take a punch and deliver a knockout without ever losing his cool. The internet was about to catch fire. But in that moment, the Senate chamber was the epicenter of a seismic shift, one that would soon ripple far beyond its walls. The moment John Kennedy leaned back in his chair, the faintest trace of a smile on his face, the Senate chamber was still processing the weight of his words. His response to Elizabeth Warren's cutting insult, calling him a relic of the past, hadn't just silenced the room, it had lit a spark that was about to ignite a wildfire across the internet and beyond. In an era where political debates often dissolve into shouting matches or petty soundbites, what Kennedy did was different. It wasn't loud or aggressive, but it was powerful, a rare blend of wit, restraint, and moral clarity that resonated far beyond the marble walls of the Senate. As the hearing continued, with senators scrambling to regain their focus and move on to the next point of discussion, the real story was just beginning to unfold outside the chamber. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were uploaded to social media, and the internet did what it does best. It exploded. The video of Warren's jab and Kennedy's masterful comeback spread like lightning, ricocheting across platforms, from X to YouTube to TikTok, racking up views, likes, and shares faster than anyone could keep up. Hashtags like #Kennedy clapback, #Oxford moment, and #Senate showdown started trending within hours, each one a testament to the moment's raw power. People weren't just sharing the clip, they were dissecting it, celebrating it, turning it into memes and reaction videos that captured the collective awe of what they'd witnessed. "That was the cleanest takedown I've ever seen," one user posted, their words accompanied by a clip of Kennedy's calm, "I didn't go to Oxford just to visit." Another wrote, "Warren threw a punch, but Kennedy dropped a nuke with a smile." The comments poured in, thousands upon thousands, from everyday Americans to political commentators, influencers, to small-town folks who saw something of themselves in Kennedy's stand. "Never judge a Southern accent," one viral post declared, summing up the sentiment that was sweeping the internet. Conservative circles hailed Kennedy as a hero, not just for defending himself, but for embodying a kind of leadership that doesn't need to shout to be heard. "This is how you handle an insult with class," a popular conservative podcast host tweeted, linking to the full video. But the praise wasn't limited to one side of the political spectrum. Even some moderate and liberal commentators, who typically aligned with Warren, admitted she'd crossed a line. She underestimated him, and it backfired spectacularly. One political analyst wrote in a widely shared op-ed, "Kennedy didn't just win the moment, redefined it. The internet couldn't get enough." YouTube channels rushed to upload the footage, some adding dramatic music, slow-motion replays, or captions like, "Watch this before you underestimate John Kennedy," and "Kennedy ends Warren's jab in 60 seconds flat." Reaction videos flooded in, with titles like "Southern Senator School's Harvard Professor," and "This is how you handle a bully like a boss." Content creators, from political junkies to casual viewers, broke down every second of the exchange. Warren's smirk, Kennedy's pause, the way his voice never wavered. One video, which zoomed in on the stunned faces of other senators in the background, racked up millions of views, with viewers commenting on the sheer discomfort in the room as Kennedy's words hit home. Memes were everywhere. One showed Kennedy's face over a lion's, captioned, "When you mess with the wrong Southerner." Another had Warren's quote next to a picture of a crumbling sandcastle, with Kennedy's response as the tidal wave. In an age where viral moments are often fueled by chaos or outrage, this one stood out for its composure. Kennedy didn't need to raise his voice or sling mud to make his point. His quiet confidence and sharp intellect did all the work. That's what made it so shareable, so unforgettable. It wasn't just a political win. It was a cultural moment, one that spoke to anyone who's ever been underestimated because of how they talk, where they're from, or how they choose to present themselves. The online frenzy wasn't just about entertainment, it was about a deeper truth. Kennedy's response struck a chord because it went beyond the Senate floor, touching on something universal. The idea that real intelligence doesn't need to be flashy, that character shines brighter than condescension. Posts on X captured this sentiment perfectly. "Kennedy just spoke for every small-town kid who's been told they're not smart enough," one user wrote. Their words retweeted thousands of times. Another added, "He didn't just defend himself, he defended all of us who've been judged for our accents or our roots." The moment became a rallying cry for people who felt dismissed or overlooked, whether because of their background, their speech, or their refusal to conform to elite expectations. It wasn't just Southerners who connected with Kennedy's words. People from all walks of life saw their own experiences reflected in his stand. Rural farmers, blue-collar workers, first-generation college students all shared stories in the comments, recounting times they'd been judged unfairly, and how Kennedy's response felt like a victory for them too. Political analysts weighed in, calling it a masterclass in leadership. In a world where politicians try to go viral with stunts, Kennedy did it with substance. One cable news pundit said, "He didn't just clap back, he elevated the conversation." The moment was dissected on talk shows, podcasts, and blogs, with hosts marveling at how Kennedy turned a personal attack into a broader statement about values. Even those who disagreed with his politics couldn't deny the power of his delivery. Warren thought she was punching down, one commentator noted. But Kennedy showed her he's playing on a whole different level. The clip became a staple in political highlight reels, a go-to example of how to handle adversity with grace. But the real impact went deeper than likes and shares. Kennedy's words, "Smart doesn't always sound fancy. Intelligence is earned, not performed," became a kind of mantra, quoted in op-eds, printed on t-shirts, and shared in motivational posts. They were a reminder that true leadership isn't about tearing others down. It's about lifting the conversation up. In a political landscape often defined by division and vitriol, Kennedy's response was a beacon of what's possible when you choose dignity over drama. It wasn't about owning Warren or scoring points for one party over another. It was about standing up for principle, for the idea that worth isn't measured by how you sound or where you're from, but by what you do and how you carry yourself. For viewers watching at home, it wasn't just a viral moment, it was a breath of fresh air. In a world where political discourse can feel like a race to the bottom, Kennedy showed that you can fight back without losing your integrity. His response wasn't just a defense of his own character, it was a defense of millions of Americans who've been told they don't belong because they don't fit a certain mold. It was a call to rethink how we judge intelligence and value. A challenge to look beyond appearances and listen to what's being said. The internet kept buzzing, with new reactions and analyses popping up days after the event. But the true legacy of that day was the lesson it left behind. Kennedy didn't just win a debate, he sparked a conversation about what it means to be smart, to be respected, to be heard. He reminded us that class and conviction still have a place in politics, that you don't need to shout to be powerful. If this moment moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment about a time you've been underestimated because of how you speak or where you're from. Let's keep this conversation alive. Because as Kennedy showed us,